When you think of New York in the late 1800s, you might imagine glittering mansions on Fifth Avenue, chandeliers blazing with hundreds of candles, and elegant women in gowns heavy with pearls and diamonds. Newspapers called it the Gilded Age. It sounded glamorous. It sounded rich. But the word gilded itself is a warning, something covered in a thin layer of gold to hide the cheap and rotten wood beneath. Because behind the polished carriages, the marble staircases, and the grand opera houses lay a world of shadows, factories choking with smoke, children laboring in dangerous mills, immigrants crushed into filthy tenements, and men who built empires with iron fists and ruthless ambition. The Gilded Age was not just a story of success. It was a story of exploitation. The city was transforming faster than anyone could imagine. Towers of iron and steel were rising against the skyline. Mansions lined Fifth Avenue, owned by names that still echo today: Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Morgan, Astor. These families lived with wealth so vast it seemed unreal. A single ball could cost what an entire neighborhood of workers might never earn in a lifetime. But only a few blocks away, on the Lower East Side, immigrants from Italy, Ireland, Germany, and Eastern Europe were packed into airless rooms. Entire families, sometimes 10 or more, shared a single damp apartment. Diseases like cholera and tuberculosis spread like wildfire. New York's glitter depended on their labor, but their lives were disposable. Men like Cornelius Vanderbilt, John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan were hailed as geniuses of business. They controlled railroads, oil, steel, and finance. To their admirers, they were the titans who built modern America. But to those beneath them, they were robber barons. Vanderbilt crushed his rivals with no mercy, bragging that he cared nothing for the law. Rockefeller built an oil empire so powerful he wiped out competition entirely, using secret deals and cutthroat tactics. Carnegie, who preached philanthropy, kept his workers in steel mills under brutal conditions, where molten metal burned men alive. Morgan, the banker, manipulated markets with a single telegram, making and breaking fortunes overnight. Yes, they built fortunes. Yes, they built cities. But at what cost? The cost was measured in broken families, crippled workers, and endless sweat. Imagine standing on Fifth Avenue, 1883, on one side, you see Alf Vanderbilt's brand new mansion, a palace of limestone, lit with gas chandeliers, its ballroom large enough to hold 1,000 guests. Inside, women's gowns shimmer with imported silk, and their jewelry glitters with European diamonds. Champagne flows like water, but only a short carriage ride away. In 5 Points, the stench of sewage fills the air. Children with hollow eyes sit barefoot in the gutter. Mothers sew clothes by candlelight until their fingers bleed. Fathers toil 12 to 14 hours a day in factories that could collapse at any moment. The Gilded Age created two Americas, one drenched in gold, the other drowning in misery. High society in New York was obsessed with appearances. To be accepted among the elite, you needed not just money, but the right kind of money. Families like the Astors represented old money, wealth inherited from generations. They looked down on the Vanderbilts, who had made their fortune more recently in railroads. To break into this circle, Alva Vanderbilt staged the most extravagant ball New York had ever seen in 1883, costing an estimated $250,000, a fortune at the time. The ball displayed unimaginable luxury. Guests arrived in costumes dripping with jewels. Musicians played endlessly as rivers of champagne poured. Newspapers breathlessly reported the spectacle. And suddenly, the Vanderbilts were accepted into society. But outside the mansion walls, the city's poor were starving. That single party could have fed thousands for months. The contrast was staggering. Between 1880 and 1900, over 9 million immigrants arrived in America, most of them funneled into New York City. They came with dreams of opportunity, but found themselves trapped in sweatshops, building railroads, or laying bricks for the very mansions they would never enter. A tailor might earn just a few dollars a week, working 15 hours a day in suffocating lofts. Children as young as 8 bent over machines, their small fingers nimble but easily mangled. Women stitched clothes until their eyes failed, and they collapsed from exhaustion. The Gilded Age elite saw these people as cheap, endless labor. If one died, Another ship would bring replacements. The gold of the Gilded Age was mined from the suffering of the poor. While tycoons ruled industry, politicians ruled the streets. In New York, the infamous Tammany Hall became a machine of corruption. Bosses like William Boss Tweed bought votes, manipulated elections, and stole millions in taxpayer money. Ordinary citizens paid taxes, but much of that money went into the pockets of corrupt politicians and their allies. Meanwhile, public services crumbled. The poor had no voice, while the rich used politics to protect their power. The Gilded Age was not just about wealth, it was about control. The few controlled everything, while the many struggled to survive. Even the term Gilded Age was satire. Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner used it in their 1873 novel, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today. To them, this era was not truly golden. It was fake, gilded, not solid, covered with a thin surface of brilliance that hid the decay beneath. And that decay was everywhere. In tenements, in factories, in sweatshops, in corrupt city halls. The shine of the age was only possible because misery was kept in the shadows. Yes, America was rising. Railroads stitched the nation together. Skyscrapers began to pierce the clouds. Industry produced more than ever before. But progress demanded sacrifice, and it was always the poor who paid. At construction sites, deaths were routine. In factories, accidents were common. Workers had no protections, no rights, no safety nets. If you were injured, you were fired. If you died, your family was left to starve. And yet the tycoons were celebrated as heroes of capitalism. Their portraits hung in grand halls. Their names adorned libraries and universities. But ask the man whose hands bled laying steel, and you'd hear a different story. Factories and railroads were the beating heart of the Gilded Age economy. But they were also prisons of labor. When workers demanded fair pay or shorter hours, they were answered with firings, blacklists, or worse. The 1877 Great Railroad Strike shut down rail lines across multiple states. The response? Federal troops with bayonets. Dozens were killed. By the 1890s, clashes became routine. At Carnegie's Homestead Steelworks in 1892, workers struck for fair wages. Carnegie's manager, Henry Clay Frick, hired Pinkerton guards. Gunfire erupted. 7 workers died. The strike was crushed. This was the Gilded Age. When workers rose, the powerful struck them down. Railroads bribed Congress for land and subsidies. Banks manipulated markets. City officials skimmed millions from taxpayers. The most notorious scandal was Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall. He stole millions through inflated contracts. A courthouse that should have cost $250,000 ballooned to over $13 million. While the poor begged for clean water and safe housing, Tweed built a political palace of corruption. Not all power was held by men. Women shaped society in their own ways. Caroline Astor ruled high society. Alva Vanderbilt staged the most expensive ball to break into it. These were wars fought with gowns and invitations, but others fought different battles. Journalist Nellie Bly exposed corruption in asylums and factories. Jane Addams opened settlement houses to help immigrants. Suffragists demanded the vote. While some women drowned themselves in pearls and silk, others risked everything to expose the darkness. Step into a tenement and you step into misery. Narrow rooms, no light, no air. Fire escapes blocked. When fires came, families burned alive. In 1890, Jacob Riis published How the Other Half Lives, shocking the nation with photographs of starving children and filthy slums. But photographs did not change reality overnight. Millions still suffered. Child labor was a hallmark of the era. Tiny fingers were perfect for machines. Children crawled under looms, carried heavy loads, and worked 12-hour days. Many were maimed, many died. Meanwhile, wealthy children on Fifth Avenue played in silk nurseries and spent summers in Newport mansions. 2 childhoods side by side, one of play, one of endless toil. In 1894, George Pullman cut wages but not rents in his company town. Workers rebelled. The American Railway Union joined them. Rail traffic across much of the nation was paralyzed. President Cleveland sent federal troops. Violence erupted. Dozens of workers were killed. The message was clear. In the Gilded Age, the government stood with the rich, not the poor. By 1900, America was dazzling and broken. Mansions rose like castles while tenements rotted. Tycoons donated libraries and universities, while refusing to pay workers a living wage. This was the paradox of the Gilded Age. progress and suffering side by side. Eventually, reformers demanded change. Labor movements grew. Child labor laws, factory safety rules, and political reforms slowly emerged. But the scars remained. The Gilded Age left behind skyscrapers, libraries, and railroads, but also graves of workers, sweat of immigrants, and the reminder that behind every chandelier, there is a shadow. So the next time you think of New York's grand mansions, of the Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Morgans, remember the hands that built them. Remember the children who stitched their clothes. Remember the workers who laid the steel. The Gilded Age shines in memory as an age of wealth. But beneath the gold, it was an age of hunger, corruption, and suffering. An age where luxury was purchased with lives. And that is the true story of America's Gilded Age, where the thin glitter of gold covered a mountain of shadows.